Hello everyone, I am Nemisha, the Communications and Outreach Coordinator in inStem. For the uninitiated, DBT inStem is the Institute for Stem Cell Science and Regenerative Medicine, India's first dedicated stem cell research institute. I'm very pleased to be welcoming you all to the 54th edition of the Archives Public Lecture Series. As some of you who have attended these talks before or are familiar with the space might know, the archives at NCBS is a public collection center for the history of science in contemporary India. It houses over 100,000 process papers, photographs, equipments, recordings, and more. They are situated in the basement of the ELC building at NCBS. Do drop by if you have the time. You can also find them online at archives.ncbs.res.in. The public lecture series is essentially talks delivered by individuals based on their vast body of work and service. These talks are framed around their exploration in and around the archives and more broadly around the history of ideas. The series has included discussions by artists, archivists, academicians, lawyers, teachers, journalists, and more. For this lecture, which is the 54th of the series, we are honored to welcome Vikas Kumar. Vikas Kumar teaches economics at the Azim Premji University. He is the co author of Numbers in India's Periphery, the Political Economy of Government Statistics. He is also the author of Waiting for a Christmas Gift, Essays on Politics, Elections and Media in Nagaland, and Numbers as Political Allies. The talk today is titled What Can a Postage Stamp Tell Us? This lecture is followed by an exhibition titled From Policies to Personalities at inStem's Beautiful Museum. The exhibition will remain open between 21st of April to 26th of April between 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Once the talk is over, we will have some time for question and answers, after which we can head towards the museum for a tour. There will also be a tea and snacks available in the atrium of inStem. So thank you so much for your time and effort, Vikas. The floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Vikas. Let me begin with a short preface. Hardly anyone uses stamps these days. Rattles are a critically endangered species. Stamps have become obscure even to the postal department. So, about 2 years ago, I took this stamp on a cover to the nearest post office and I was going to post it. So the postal staff there could not decide if this was a 550 rupee stamp or 1000 rupee stamp. I spent about 15 minutes to explain to them that this is only a 10 rupee stamp. And they also made a call to the nearest post office, another woman, and to see if they knew uh, how this was, because they have become used to scanning those uh, barcodes and they rarely come across these bits of papers. However, there's some renewed interest in philately these days. Some of us are privileged enough to stay indoors during COVID, and we use that time to excavate our hoardings. The other reason why there's some interest is that we are celebrating a major anniversary of the nation state, and this, even as some of the foundational assumptions about India as a modern secular democracy have been under spotlight for more than a decade, and with this soaring of the optimism of the 2000s, many of us are now going back to see what went wrong and how did it go wrong. I'm using stamps lately as a medium to revisit the country's journey so far. So I'm extremely delighted to be with all of you this evening for a collective session of reflection. I began collecting stamps coins at the age of 5. At that time, these were mere pieces of paper for me, colorful pieces of paper, and which helped me to vicariously travel to different places. Later, I began when I did a BTech from metallurgy. I explored themes at the interface of ancient Indian history and metallurgy. Around this time, I also became interested in contemporary history. Now, it struck me that uh, Unlike the ancient Indian or history about pre-modern India, the contemporary debates on history, they don't engage at all with the large output of stamps and coins of the Indian state. So the use of stamps or coins stops in 1947. Post-colonial history doesn't engage with these things. So I was surprised with that. Now this is surprising. For instance, the Nehru Memorial Museum and Library does not even have a fraction of the philatelic material on Jawaharlal Nehru. Right? And so therefore, the archivists of contemporary India have not paid any attention at all to this source of information. And I am so, and this should be, and if you look at, for instance, three new biographies of Dr. Ambedkar have been published over the last few months, and none of them engages with the large philatelic material out there on Dr. Ambedkar. So this is surprising for two reasons. Firstly, the provision of postal service is a major routine of the contemporary state. A modern state provides you with national security, postal services, diplomatic services, etc., etc. And in fact, if you see, the no other department of government of India, at least in the early decades, was in so close contact with people, and it came in contact so frequently with the people. So if you see here, in 1854 we had 701 post offices. 1947 we had 22,000 post offices. Between 47 and 68, just 2 decades, we had a five-fold increase in the number of post offices, and 91% of these were in the rural areas. 3 lakh villages were served daily by the postal service in 1968. 6 lakh villages were served at least once a week. In 1968, the postal department was already the largest financial institution in terms of the number of people engaged with it. So this was so anything where the postal, so this was a department which came in contact with people more often than any other department at that time, particularly because the primary education was not as widespread as it is now. Now the rate of growth of post offices has slowed down over the years, but it has not completely stopped. If you see, between in the last 5 years, there have been uh, the government has sanctioned about 6,000 new post offices. The majority of these post offices are, of course, are in Chhattisgarh, Telangana, Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, tri-junction, that junction between these states. But even in the city of Bangalore, they are opening newer evening post offices. A new three-dimensional post office, 3D printed post office is being built in Bangalore. Therefore, this is the even though the rate of growth has slowed down, but post offices the postal services continue to be a major function of government of India, and should interest students of contemporary India. It should also interest us because postal services enable other functions of government of India. So this census of India cannot be conducted without the support of postal services. And there are so many other key functions of government of India with which it is very closely identified, for which the postal services are important. Uh, we should also engage with, and now given the fact that this is so widespread in terms of its footprint, it actually serves as a advertisement space. The postal envelope and the stamp, they serve as advertisement space for the government of India. So I would like to know, what are our governments advertising through this? What are the things that they're advocating? What is the kind of propaganda that is being preached here? Uh, now, so this talk will try to illustrate the usefulness of philatelic archive for understanding contemporary Indian history. Now, we are not imposing our interpretation on these stamps. I mean, we are not trying to read history into them when where there's and the postal department itself believes that the stamps and its other products are part of the historical archive, right? This is a postal this is a brochure issued in the 50th year of the independence, and which is performance of postage stamps historical documents. It's not only that the department thinks so. You people otherwise believe that postal stamps can be treated as sources of history. So here you see a news item that someone objected to the depiction of breastfeeding on a magazine's cover. So the news item here reminds people that in 1984 there was a definitive stamp showing breastfeeding. Right? So therefore, people widely use this to, I mean, postage. I mean, they treat postage stamps as historical documents, and that is the spirit in which we are going to engage with it. What can we study using here? We can of course look at postal technologies, and there's a new postal museum in the somewhere near the church street on this. We can look at postal art. We can look at postal communication processes from the bureaucratic perspective. We can also look at it from the perspective of the kind of advertisements, advocacy, and propaganda. Right? We can try to understand the flows of information. What you see in 1870s, 1870s, the British colonial government, they started using postcards and telegrams to very quickly convey information about weather in different parts of the country, or the level of hams. Private traders started using postcards in the late 19th century to share prices of grains. uh, the government started using postcards to capture changes in health, right? And at the same time, this is also a time when postcard or postal services began to be used to build new communities, or rebuild old communities. Different caste groups, different organizations of caste, community based organizations, other organizations, they started extensively using the postal services to connect with their members across the country. And so for instance, there's a Marwadi organization with subscribers in Burma, right? And they are corresponding with those members through the postal services. Now we can also look at the politics of postal messages, who chooses by, etc. And also, as I mentioned earlier, see the state, what is the Indian state? Indian state is a collection of processes. We come to know that Indian state is present if we see the postal services provided by it, if we come across elections conducted by it, if we see different kind of functions conducted by it. If those functions cease to be performed, all the buildings will still be there, but we will not feel the Indian state. We'll feel the Indian state only when certain functions are discharged from those buildings, right? So we can see postal services as a major institutional routine of the Indian state. uh, uh, what else can we study in case of post offices? Every post office wall is full of advertisements. What have these walls been used over the last 70 years in terms of advertisement? In the late 1960s, permanent enameled metal signboards with family planning symbol were placed in 1 lakh post offices. So I'd like to know what kind of messages have been painted on these walls. We can also see all kinds of things are open for investigation. So you can see here, this is a, a registration counterfoil. It says here, must stay safe. So every bit of the postal material is used to communicate messages, right? uh, Here you've got a cancellation of the census of India. uh, this is from different censuses. This is a family planning cancellation, children by choice, not by chance. But the person who designed it isn't sure if the Hindi audience is prepared to understand this message. So this is Kam Santan Sukhi Insan. This is not a Google translation of children by choice, not by chance. So it says Kam Santan Sukhi Insan. Right? This is a quick snapshot of cancellations, the family planning cancellations. Now, where but where do we study these things. See, you have to look at the life cycle of postal products, and you can study each one of them at different points of this life cycle. Right? So, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to look at four different things in this talk. I'm not going to go deeply into the literature. I'll just leave that in this talk. But very briefly, there have been discussions on whether stamps postal material has only symbolic value, or is the physical utilitarian value much more than that. Uh, and then people are interested in the sociological facts associated with stamps, and finally the state effects. Trying to see stamps as means through which state is made real, right? So I'm not going to go deeply into this literature, but I would rather mm, move to the four things I want to cover in this lecture, right? So the unfortunate thing is that much of this material has been lost, right? It is not there, systematically cataloged by the postal department. Some of this is with private collectors, but then not many have cataloged it from the perspective of an archive. So I try to see, I try to show how we need to build an archive using this material. I look at, the making of Baba Saheb as an individual. I look at uh, the portrait of the Rashtriya Swayam Sevak Sangh as an organization, and then I look at, three key policies of the government of India, which is small family, small savings, and grow more food. And finally, I look at the public culture, that is from policies to personalities. Right? Now, these are two calendars of stamps issued in 1966 and 1973. Right? If you turn them around, they give you a list of stamps to be issued in that year. So they were issued in the December before beginning of next year. Both of them do not have any stamp on Dr. Ambedkar listed here. Right? However, you have stamps on Ambedkar issued that year. Now, for me, the stamp of Ambedkar is important. The kind of images that are the kind of the quotations that have been associated with him. But it's also important to look at the calendar and see why. So this means that in 1965 December, until then, there was no plan to issue a stamp on Dr. Ambedkar. Then between then and 14th of April 1966, somebody decided to issue the stamp. Now we know that this period is associated with transition between Lal Bahadur Shastri's administration and Indira Gandhi administration. So we see some thinking happening here in terms of political intervention to include Ambedkar. Ambedkar was the first Dalit personality to feature on a postage stamp, and in that year you see this letter being sent from Kumbhakonam to New York, and you have Dr. Ambedkar next to Hazari Prasad Dwivedi, no, sorry, Mahavir Prasad Dwivedi and Ranjit Singh. So suddenly people both within and outside the country see a new face. Right? Now, so for me it's important to include the postal calendars. Right? Now, but now, in the information brochure issued with this stamp, Ambedkar is portrayed as somebody who took extreme positions on social matters. In the information brochure of this stamp, Ambedkar is shown as somebody who is highly controversial. So Ambedkar is part of the national, this philatelic space, but there's some ambivalence still. There's some concern that how to incorporate this person. Now, there's something, and 1990-91, he gets Bharat Ratna, there's a coin on him, a stamp on him. But this pair of brochures marked the transition of Ambedkar to, to the leader that he is in now in public imagination. This is 1979 National Archives commemorative stamps of information brochure. It mentions that they have private papers, they are undertaking private papers of Dr. Prasad, Maulana Abdul Kalam Azad, Pandit Gol Mallah Pant, etc. But Ambedkar is not here. 1992, the National Archives stamps information brochure says that we built a rich collection of private papers, eminent personalities, and here Ambedkar is mentioned. So the National Archives goes out of its way to say that we have Dr. Ambedkar's paper. It tells you the transition of a place where Ambedkar is not mentioned, and then he put it here. So we have to. So when we look at, when I'm building an archive on Ambedkar, which I've done, I track every possible occurrence and its previous and successive references to see the larger context of it. And then once Ambedkar entered the national pantheon, you see Ambedkar's quotations on postcards and inland letter cards, and an honor restricted to only a handful of Indian leaders. You see Ambedkar featuring on a definitive stamp in 2001. So you see here, this is a stamp on Ambedkar released under the Congress government 2013. This is the stamp on Dr. Ambedkar released in 2017. Now you see the difference between the release function. Here, the entire, who's who of Maharashtra and the Prime Minister are there, and more than 20,000 people attended the stamp release. And here, handful of people are around. So this also gives you an idea of the difference in the style of working of political parties, how they engage people. Right? So for me, even the stamp release, functions are important. They are part of the archive. Now, you could look at Ambedkar Philately from the perspective of how it has evolved over time. You could look at the geography of Ambedkar Philately, right? Now, and then you can ask questions. Why do we have so many occurrences in this coastal belt of Andhra Pradesh, right? And why do we have hardly anything in, say, Bihar, or say, Tamil Nadu? So we can ask questions once we compile the archive and put it across on your timelines, and on apps, we can start seeing the emergence patterns and then ask questions about them. Now I'll move to the next thing. This is in this case, I'll first begin with the conclusions and then go to the images. So we see that the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh started appearing on stamps in 1978 when the Jan Sangh was part of the Janta government at that time. And so if we compare the output over the years, we see that there's a growing openness about the umbilical cord of BJP leaders and their parent organization. There's a clear highlighting of ideological commitments. But through this output, I also learned something about the internal rivalries of the party or the Sangh Parivar. We also learn about who is emerging as the clear leader, ideologue within the Sangh Parivar. By looking at the output of stamps from there in their period, we also learn about the relationship between different groups on the right of the center. Right? And I'll come to that, but just very briefly, national level competitors are shunned; they are kept out of philatelic space. The local competitors and apolitical groups are co-opted because they don't present a they don't compete for the same space at the national level. Right? Now, so I'll let me this is a very interesting pair of stamps, commemorative stamps issued by the Atal Bihari Vajpayee government, 1999, 18th of March. There's the stamp on Dr. Hedgewar, who is the founder of Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. Now, every bit of this cover and the information brochure is a lot packed into it. The map of India is shown without the boundaries of neighboring countries because the RSS believes in Akhand Bharat, and this gives them message that they don't believe in contemporary political boundaries. And the whole map is filled with saffron. They show an elderly Dr. Hedgewar rising like a sun above the subcontinent. You should note that here they show Mahatma Gandhi. This hazy person, Mahatma Gandhi, right? Now, why not show Gandhi very clearly? You could have shown clearly. I mean, you could have done that, but right now this is another, a commemorative stamp issued under Bajpayee government. It show, I mean, depicts Mahatma Gandhi as the map of India, and here they show Dr. Ambedkar and the preamble to the constitution. Uh, Now, this is the original preamble, not the one modified during the emergency, right? A. B. This is the space which was until then customarily reserved for Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. So they take Nehru out and bring in Dr. Ambedkar. So when we look at stamps and the way they are presented, it tells us a lot about how the government of the day is thinking. Now let's go further. These are three information brochures, the same information brochures of the stamp on Dr. Hedgewar. This is a complimentary one. This is one that you get by paying 2 rupees, and this is also one that you get by paying 2 rupees. Here you cannot see very clearly in the scan, but there is a slip pasted on the sentence, and they printed something else. Here again, you can see that slip, right? And here you don't see any slip. In this they say इस डाक विभाग इस महान देशभक्त की जन्म शती के अवसर पे एक स्मारक डाक टिकट जारी करके प्रसन्नता का अनुभव करता है. The postal department is happy to issue a commemorative stamp on the occasion of the birth centenary of Dr. Hedgewar. Then they realize that this is not the centenary. This is the 110th birthday. So in some places, the postal department, I mean, post offices had already received this one, and where they had not yet sent, they stuck stuck this slip on top of it, saying that we are happy to commemorate this great nationalist of the right now. So you, I mean, an archive would have to track all possible variations here. Right. Now, the other interesting thing is that 18th of March is not the centenary of Dr. I mean, is not the birthday of Dr. Hedgewar. It is 1st of April. So then, why are they issuing a stamp on 18th of March? This is because 18th of March in that year was the birthday as per the Vikrami calendar, right? So he was born on the day of Ugadi, and Ugadi in 1999 was on the 18th of March. So we have to do a lot of back and forth to understand, and now this is to understand how the government is, trying to present its leaders. I'll now move to this. This is a 1978 information brochure on Deen Dayal Upadhyay. 1978, when the communications ministry was with the Bharati Jansangh leader, and in that at that time they issued a stamp on Deen Dayal Upadhyay as well as Dr. Shyam Prasad Mukherjee. But Atal Bihari Vajpayee government, and then after that there's no stamp on any RSS leader. When Atal Bihari Vajpayee comes to power, he issues a stamp on Shyam Prasad Mukherjee, but Deen Dayal Upadhyay is not touched at all. Right? Just very strange that Deen Dayal Upadhyay is not engaged at all in the philatelic space in the entire duration of 6 years that Atal Bihari Vajpayee was in the government. But when Narendra Modi government comes to power, Shyam Prasad Mukherjee is confined to a single stamp, whereas Deen Dayal Upadhyay is everywhere. He suddenly becomes the fourth most important political leader in the philatelic space. Now, the Deen Dayal Upadhyay was a competitor of Atal Bihari Vajpayee, a senior competitor, and even long after Deen Dayal Upadhyay was no more, that division between the two camps was still affecting the way party leaders saw each other. Right now, this is a stamp of 2018 and 2018, where Deen Upadhyay and River Tambo are shown together. I mean, so this is on the occasion of 20-year strategic partnership between India and South Africa. This was the space, at least in case of South Africa, customarily meant for Mahatma Gandhi, right? But they brought in they brought in Deen Dayal Upadhyay. The government is also trying to is trying to announce to the rest of the world that a new political group is in power in the country now, and it has its own ideologues as well. Now, but where is Mr. Savarkar? BJP has been power for about 20 years now, roughly 20 years now, with Bharati Hansang and Bajpayee, etc. But where is Mr. Savarkar? There's no stamp of Savarkar at all. We like to, I mean, we understand that he's one of the icons of that group, but why is there no stamp of Savarkar? The only stamp on Savarkar was issued in 1970 by Indira Gandhi, right? So the Hindu Mahasabha and the RSS were competing for the same space at the national level. So they wouldn't. I mean, they cannot. I mean, there's not much room there for two big groups there. So Indira Gandhi was in the other side. So she chose one of the two, and this is the political rehabilitation of Savarkar, and we still are living with that, with the consequences of that. Uh, so therefore, you see, we can learn a lot about internal what's happening within different political camps as well from stamps. Now let me come to the subject of the exhibition that we are having at present, and I'm going to spend more time on this. India's philatelic output used to be progressive and prospective in nature. It highlighted potential futures. It highlighted potential futures. The first definitive series of India replaced the King George series, and it foregrounded our cultural heritage. It showcased 16 different architectural monuments from across the country, and they brought to us the finest of the monuments of the country. After that, the government issued a series of stamps on different colonial institutions: Geological Survey of India, Archaeological Survey of India, and so on. So, post and telegraph, so on and so forth. The message was that we begin with the rich cultural heritage of 5,000 years or whatever, but then the material foundations of what we call modern India were laid down in the colonial period, and there was no sense of anxiety that we are promoting the colonial institutions. They were treated as matter of fact. This is the context in which we are today, right? Now, after having laid down these two set of stamps, the government of India issued the second definitive stamp, series of stamps. Stamps served a purpose. The second definitive series was issued a year ahead of the second 5-year plan. These are definitive stamps printed in crores and sent across the country to every post office. This was government's way of telling people that we are going to introduce a major economic reform, and these are the major objectives. Right. So you see, if you see this information brochure, you have dams, agriculture, you have industries, housing, schools and healthcare. So it was saying that these are the futures. This is the future that we imagine for all of us here, right? And you have industry. So if you look at agriculture, so this is a tractor. It's called Hala Yantra. At that time, tractor wasn't really known as tractor; it's called hal yantra, right? And you have, but at the same time, you've got these old ways style farming as well as in new. So there was this recognition that the transition will not be absolutely clean. There's going to be a mix of things in between. So you see, every part of this, the I mean, railway industry, fertilizer, textile, steel, rare earth, telephone, then healthcare, uh, cottage industries, transport and communication. So they are laying out the entire 5 year plan 1 year ahead for everyone to see that we are going to do this. Right. So this is the state trying to connect with people. Now, if you zoom into some of these stamps, these are from some of the later series. If you zoom into these stamps, there's a lot of detail packed in less than 1 square uh, centimeter. This is a definitive stamp which shows a tractor. You have wheat here. You have a planned habitation here, uh, uh, water supply, and public broadcasting here. This is a stamp released on the after the on the occasion of launch of the satellite instructional television experiment, and they have four objectives laid out here. Family, I mean, this experiment. So 2,400 villages across India, they had kept receivers, and they said that we are going to spread message about family planning, agriculture, healthcare, and education through this. They did not know that the satellite, I mean, television will be used for prime time debates as well. So yes, now if you see this family planning stamp, you have a small house with a family of three, and there's a girl child, and the girl child is shown holding a book, and the family is seeing her off on the way to school. A lot of details are packed into each of these stamps. They are trying to convey to you a future. It may not be attainable in the short run, but this is what we are trying to do, right? And you say, well, now in this case, the government has to be open to. I mean, there's a risk involved here. You said that you are going to do this, but you did not do this. But they're still taking the risk of telling you in advance that this is what we are trying to do, right? Now, this is Bhakra Nangal Dam stamp. You have, dam, you have electricity, water supply, a lot of details packed here. Now, now look at these stamps on family planning. In the government of India had, if you look at this stamp, that like output and the output on uh, coins as well, one of the most consistent policies of the government of India was family planning. Whether they succeeded in controlling population to the extent that they wanted to is a different question. But this was one policy which was consistently on stamps and coins for a very long time, and there was a lot of creative thinking in this. So we actually, if you, I'm not shown the other parts here. We began with a three-child family. He said, don't go beyond three. And then we came to two. Always the girl, except for this time, always the girl child is shown to be the elder and the boy is younger one. You have, then we quietly shifted to a three-member family. We just one child, and that child is always shown to be a girl, right? And then the moment 1990s, there was a realization that the shrinking family size is also associated with skewing of a child sex ratio. So there was a parallel campaign to warn people not to detect the sex of fetus, right? The other consistent campaign was about small savings. Again, now this campaign began in 1960s, but the small savings campaign actually began in 50s. Right? And that was again a campaign with a lot of innovation, a lot of thinking going into the design of the messages. And the third campaign, which was important and which is consistently present, was the Grow More Food campaign, where again a lot of innovations were and you'll see some stamps on that in the exhibition as well. Other than this, we really did not have a consistent campaign over the decades on anything else. For instance, untouchability was not part of any long-standing campaign in the philatelic space, even though cancellations on untouchability, a few quotes on untouchability on postal stationery, but it was not a consistent campaign. Right? Industries were never after 1955. There was no systematic attempt to promote industries as an economic future. There was hardly any campaign for education either. A separate series of stamps on promoting literacy. That was not the case. So you see, this gives us an idea when we talk about. I mean, because I teach economics and economic history. So for me, it's important to note that industries, despite all the hype around the second five-year plan, industries were not part of the key campaigns, the publicity campaigns of Government of India. And that tells you something about the consistency or the lack of it when it comes to focus on industries. Now, gradually from being prospective in nature that I am going to do this, we the balance tipped in favor of retrospective commemoration, that I have achieved this, right? And with government policies gradually ceding ground to personalities. So 1976, for the first time, a definitive series in India, which was until now reserved exclusively for public policy, uh, featured personalities. Indira Gandhi government during the emergency brought Jawaharlal Nehru and Mahatma Gandhi on the in the definitive series. So I'm moving from a position where definitive series was exclusively meant for public policy, and the commemorative series was also to a very large extent dedicated to public institutions. You have moved to a position where the personalities, I mean, the commemorative series is expanding first of all faster than the definitive series, and the definitive series is also now featuring personalities. uh, uh, eventually the definitive series was reduced to a commemorative series. In 2008-9, the Manmohan Singh government issued definite. I mean, they issued a new definitive series for the first time in history of India. The definitive series was entirely dedicated to personalities. See, in the Indira Gandhi's time, when they released the special definitive series, the main definitive series continued to focus intensely on public policy, right? Personalities featured only on the special definitive series, and subsequent governments continued with this arrangement. The only change that they introduced first two was in terms of who features where, and that, but they did not change this distribution between commemorative, special definitive, and definitive series. The Manmohan Singh government, it dedicated the entire definitive series to personalities. Right? I mean, they could have released definitive series on RTI, RTE, MG Narega, Aadhaar, nuclear energy, but they did not. Right? And interestingly, even in this expanded definitive series, entirely dedicated to personalities, they uh, they excluded Sardar Patel and Subhash Chandra Bose, who were included in the special definitive series during the previous Bajpayee government. Now you have a larger series and you still exclude Sardar Patel and those, and we know how controversies around these personalities have been again and again over the past few years. Now when the new Narendra Modi government came, now they issued a much larger, in fact the largest definitive series of India, right? But they also continued with the previous government's decision to dedicate the entire definitive series just to personalities. They could have used it to talk about Ujjwala, about so many other schemes with this Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, Ujjwala, etc., but they chose to focus only on personalities. So you see, from position where we had, definitely, I mean, a very, I mean, large body of stamps being dedicated to public policy, that to a perspective, we are now reduced to celebrating our past. Right? I'll give you another example. So, this is the 10th definitive series. Now, this pair of first day covers captures our the shift in our public discourse. 1992, the state of Haryana celebrated its silver jubilee. It had separated out from the larger state of Punjab. Now in 1992, now this is 1 year after the introduction of liberalization. The cachet of the first day cover foregrounds the cultural identity of the state. It is very close. I mean, the people they very closely associate with Kurukshetra war. Right? They show the Bhagavad, a scene from that war here. But on the stamp, they show electricity, tap water, tractor, agriculture here. Right? So it's a combination of cultural identity and developmental aspirations. Okay. Now, 25 years later, on the occasion of the 50th anniversary of the state, the first day cover features a scene from the Mahabharata, which is associated with the identity, cultural identity of the state. But the stamp also features a scene from Mahabharata and the map of India, no, and the map of the state. The cancellation also shows the map of the state. Now here the cancellation shows wheat. There are three things where you can, I mean, you can potentially include three things on a first day cover: cachet, and the cancellation, and the stamp. So there's a lot of room for multiple messages to be integrated here, but all three of them here are aligned to the cultural identity. This is turned to cultural politics that we see over the past 15-20 years in the country. Uh, Now, so if you see here, just now I'm close to my conclusion. So you see, we had a very small number of commemorative stamps being issued initially. This changed under the Indira Gandhi government, where more commemorative stamps issued, and which means that it could include more personalities. And so commemorative series expands, and and expands in favor of personalities. So you see, and then you see, whenever there's a key turning point in the political history, there's some change here. So 1973, this is in the run up to the emergency, right? 1987, this is the shift from Congress to just before the shift of Congress to the Hanta Dal other experiments. 1998, this again is a shift from the Devgowda, this government, to Bajpayee government. 2009, around election. So we can actually study the distribution of this and see how the deviations and outliers can be explained, and these deviations and outliers are going to tell us a lot about contemporary history. What's more important though is that initially we began with almost equal number of definitive and commemorative stamps over a period of time. Gradually the commemoratives picked up and definitives reduced, and this continues. So So definitives continue to be small number in the mix, and commemoratives continue to increase. And commemoratives were taken up all by personalities. After a point, definitive stamps also started featuring personalities. After this point, definitives were entirely dedicated to personalities. Right. So you see now you have to note here something else as well. While the number of stamps of commemorative and definitive stamps is same, or almost same, we should note that definitives are printed in crores, and commemoratives are printed in a few lakhs. So if you look at the actual number of stamps circulating at this point of time, there were at least perhaps 10 times more definitive stamps than there were commemorative stamps. But over the years, as we've seen that personalities are becoming more and more important in our public life. Now, let me go to the last bit of my presentation. The stamps also tell us something about the D. See, the moment I have told you that the stamps are reflecting a turn to personality-centric public discourse, but then the next question is there also a deinstitutionalization of the Indian state? I'd argue that there indeed has been a deinstitutionalization of the Indian state, as reflected in the postal material. So, if you look at the 1993 information brochure on PC Mahalanobis, you see a lot of technical information given here. Look at a more recent information brochure. The amount of information shared is much lesser than you see here, and there has been a steady decline in the amount of information shared by the postal department over the years. I see this as a mark of deinstitutionalization. The interesting thing is that a sharp decline happened in the late 2000, in the late 2000s, after the government introduced RTI. So after the government introduced RTI, whatever little the postal department was sharing early, even that was stopped. So we have to see that change from top doesn't really matter, if you don't have effective bureaucracy out there which can implement that change, right? Now, so um, the amount of information and the quality of information has reduced over the years. The interesting thing is that information about information. You see, the information brochures give you information about stamps, and then there is information about information brochures. That information about information brochures is almost vanished now. We don't know much about the design of information brochure and the printing of information brochure. Even whatever little information about stamp which used to be shared earlier has now been almost discontinued. Stamp calendars of the kind that I showed you earlier, from which I can ask questions that why was Ambedkar added after the publication of the stamp release calendar? I can ask this only because the government of India shared that information with me. But after 1980s, they have discontinued calendars. The stamps are increasingly very poorly designed. The demarcation between the boundaries between definitive series have almost been abandoned. They're not clearly marked. There's been a privatization of sorts of definitive FDCs. The 10th definitive series, no official FDCs were issued, and in 11th definitive series, even the first day cancellations were not issued. Right. So, is this deinstitutionalization recent, and is it confined to the postal department? This deinstitutionalization began in 1980s. It is not recent. It has continued steadily, irrespective of which party was or which personality was in power. And this is not confined only to the postal department, because the information being shared by the Indian Census Department and other departments also registered a sharp decline after 1980s. I mean, after 1970s. So we are seeing a widespread pattern across India, a trend, a steady trend of poor quality of information and lesser information being shared by the Indian state. So I will conclude here. I hope I haven't overshot my time. Uh, I have by by a few minutes. And so now we'll. I mean, I'll be happy to take questions. I hope I have been able to convey to you that we need to build a robust postal archive to understand contemporary India. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for such an informative and insightful talk. Do we have any questions?
Hello. Thank you for this engaging lecture, sir. Sir, I had two questions. One is about the last slide that you showed, uh, which is about poorly designed stamps. So, how do you say and how do we conclude that yes, they are poorly designed stamps? And secondly, the poor demarcation of boundaries between series.
Right.
So, these, if you can just dwell a bit more
So
on these.
I can the artist. We can compare the artistic quality of stamps. A, and we see that how the most recent stamps are simply copied from the internet. In fact, in one case, and they luckily detected it on time. They had used an image of Subhash Chandra Bose from the movie on Subhash Chandra Bose, and Sachin Khedekar, the actor, was almost shown there, but then they detected it. I am told that they detected it on time. Now, so you know that both the artistic quality and the details packed into stamps have come down. The but to satisfactorily answer your question, I'll actually have to show you through 3,000 plus stamps issued by Government of India how the nature of art has changed. Right, so that's one. In fact, in one case, there have been cases where they have incorrectly identified images, spelling mistakes on stamps. That's one thing. About the poor demarcation of boundaries between series. We knew very clearly where this second, first, third, fourth definitive series began and ended, right? So because these series served a purpose. I'm releasing the second definitive series was released for second 5-year plan. The third definitive series was released to mark the inauguration of the new currency, transition from Ana to Paisa, right? So we know, and the postal department would release a calendar, would release a postal information brochure, right? And they would give you first day cancellation, so you know when it began, and then. But in fact, in how the earlier cases, they also issued the last day of issue as well at times. Right? But now, but after a point, they discontinued the practice of indicating when they are beginning, right? And they decoupled the definitive series from specific public policies, right? So therefore, so we don't. So for instance, the 11th definitive series, nobody knows for sure when a stamp was first issued. And you say, but Papa, is this important? No, it is important for me to know when the Indian government first decided to issue a stamp on Gopinath Bardoloi, because he's the first Northeastern personality to feature in the definitive series. Why did it decide only then? Was there a election before that? Was there something? So unless I know these dates, I will not be able to read the state's mind or the political party which is power its mind. So I need to know that, and those boundaries have been completely abandoned. We don't know really what starts when. Yes.
I have two questions. First, the very question: what is the process by which a stamp is released? Second question is for those of us who traveled around India. I think it's very clear that Bollywood has an extremely important role in shaping our national identity.
Yes.
Does Bollywood feature in the Philately history and so far?
Yes. I just yes. So there's a Philately advisory committee which includes the minister of the concerned minister, communication minister, and the bureaucracy of that department, apart from the philatelic division of the postal department. Then there are private individuals who are known as philatelists who are part of that committee. This committee meets and they take into account suggestions. I mean, there are two things there. There are certain things which the postal department itself suggests, right? Then there are certain suggestions which come from different departments of the government. A third category of suggestions come from private individuals and organizations. So for instance, the 2017 stamp on Diksha Bhumi on Dr. Ambedkar, this was proposed by a political leader from the city of Nagpur, and he went to the ministry and said, we want to have a stamp on Dr. Ambedkar's Diksha Bhumi. So fine. So now this suggestion goes to the Philatelic Advisory Committee. The Philatelic, he had given a suggestion for a single stamp. The Philatelic Advisory Committee accepted the proposal, but the Postal Department then converted into seat-and stamp with two conjoined stamps, right? A. Now, there was this constraint that the person who proposes, a private individual who proposes a stamp, he has to buy a minimum number of stamps, maybe a lakh or so. So he then again went to Nitin Gadkari, a prominent leader from Maharashtra. His intervention helped to waive this restriction. You see, there is a lot of process of to and fro between different groups of people through which this is decided. And sometimes suggestions also come from international bodies. So, for instance, and the International Labour Organization is celebrating a major anniversary. So then suggestions would come from there. Sometimes it so happens that the United Nations or the SARC chooses to celebrate a particular year as the year of Haman or so and so forth. Then those also become part of a philatelic production. So there are different ways in which suggestions come, and philatelic advisory committee takes note of them. Stamps which cannot be suggestions which cannot be accommodated in the national series. These are then accommodated locally within postal circles in the form of special covers. Special covers can be suggested by private individuals, and they have to bear the entire expense of that, and the postal department, the local postal department, takes care of the approval process, etc. So therefore there are many different ways in which these are suggested and processed. And so if you see here, for instance, uh, in case of postal stamps, these postage stamps, everything comes from New Delhi. So we cannot say anything about the geography of these unless we go back to the Philately Advisory Committee notes and see who proposed what. So, for instance, his stamps proposal came from Nagpur, right? But in case of special covers, because these are issued locally, so we can actually find out the name of the post office from which they are issued, and from this we can excavate the geography of that, right? So there are different ways. Now, the second question was about about Hollywood. Hollywood has featured very prominently on stamps, and there have been series of stamps on singers as well as actors and directors, etc. Raja Saib Phalke, Raj Kapoor. They featured prominently on postage stamps. There has also been a definitive stamp on Satyajit Ray. Those, so Satyajit Ray is not part of Hollywood, but still, looking from the perspective of filmmakers, so Satyajit Ray has been on a definitive stamp, which is something quite of an achievement, because the definitive stamps are meant for the most important personalities in the government's opinion, right? So Satyajit Ray is there. So Hollywood does feature on these, and I mean, in fact, a lot of artists feature on stamps, on definitive as well as commemorative stamps. So yes, and there are people who specialize just on film actors on stamps. Yeah.
So I think we should now wrap up the talk. Okay. Okay.
So for the past few years, I've been collecting unusual stamps. So as compared to definitive slash commemorative series, what is the value of an unusual or odd stamp,
See,
especially in terms of political significance?
odd shaped stamps.
Odd shaped and unusual. So it comes in different materials. It is odd shaped as well.
See,
S-
odd shaped stamps and so I understand, for instance, Bhutan has stamps on CD
Yes,
disc,
exactly.
etc.
Yes, yes.
So those see those stamps, for instance, Bhutan for Bhutan stamp, not now, but in the past, until a decade or two ago, it was a major source of foreign revenue, right? So they would see issue stamps on all kinds of people. I mean, if they see that there's market for this for particular stamps, so they issue in that. And these odd stamps were actually a way of attracting international buyers. So they don't have a. I mean, they have political significance insofar as it tells you that Bhutan is dependent on foreign exchange. I mean, on Philately as a means of generating foreign
Exchange.
exchange. A lot of these small countries have this. So, for instance, I think in 2018 or 17, Tuvalu issued a stamp on, I mean, a coin on Lakshmi and Ganesh.
Yeah, you know.
Now, Tuvalu is hardly any practicing Hindu. I don't know how many Hindus have ever been there, even as tourists either. But then Tuvalu knows that there's a market for this. So but they don't have their own mints. So they get the coin minted in an Australian mint, and then that is then sold to collectors in India. Right. So therefore, I mean, odd stamps and coins coming from small countries don't have any political value in
Mm.
terms of their. In case of India, there are few odd shaped stamps. They are they don't have much of political value in terms of their value in the open market. See, the value of something depends on if there are people who are buying it.
Mm.
Right. So Mahatma Gandhi is a major a magnet for buyers. So an identical stamp issued in the same year, same quantity on Mahatma Gandhi, somebody else, the price of Mahatma Gandhi stamp would be at least 5 times than the normal stamp price, right? So it depends on that. Or somebody needs it. I mean, if you have something and I need it, so I'll pay a very high price to you. But the same thing will be maybe of no value to someone else, right? So it depends. So these are things where there is no clear value at all. I mean, things which were I mean, they are going through catalog of stamps which are going to be on sale, covers which are going to be sale soon, and these are from 1600 somethings to onwards, envelopes, etc. Now, unless you are deeply into the history of postage, you won't pay 10,000 pounds for these covers. So, unless somebody really values the study of history of postage, they won't pay that. So that cover has no value unless there are people specializing in that. So if you see of late, there has been a marked decline in the prices of stamps and covers. This is because there's a generational shift, and the new generation does not buy these things anymore. So most of the stamp philatelic material has become very cheap, but the most important one continues to be extremely expensive. In fact, its price is so there's a kind of K-shaped price, variation, evolution in the philatelic space. Most of the routine FDCs, etc., normal ones have gone down, and this specialized material is picking up prices at very fast pace.
So let's wrap the discussion now, and I would request everyone to proceed for tea and snacks. It has been arranged in the ATM. And once again, I'll thank you, Vikas, for such a unique lecture. And let's give a big round of applause to this.